Back on September 12th, Midnight's Edge brought to you the exclusive scoop that the filmmakers behind The Rise of Skywalker were struggling to lock down a final edit of the movie. With editing and tweaking, a total of 6 potential endings were possible at the time. They were in a rush to decide on the final shape of the movie. Now, 1 month later, and with only 2 months to go until the movie opens, the situation isn't merely not better, it may be even worse. You might wonder, how could that be possible, and how could there be 6 different endings in the first place? In this video, we will add clarity to that, as we bring you the latest developments from behind the scenes of Star Wars and Lucasfilm. We will go through the latest rumors making the rounds and explore the origins of the rumored 6 different endings, before we uncover why The Rise of Skywalker is so much more important to Disney than previously thought. If you like the content provided in this video, then please help share it, leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you already haven't. As usual, we must warn you that the information that has been supplied to us cannot be independently verified, and must be therefore taken with a grain of salt and treated as rumor pending further confirmation. However, at this point, it is something of an open secret within Hollywood that Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is still shooting. By that we don't mean animation and special effects work, but actual flesh and blood actors being filmed on a soundstage. Where comparable productions are concerned, Episode 9 is reportedly getting both the Justice League treatment and the John Carter treatment. If you don't know what that means, we're about to elaborate. When Disney acquired Lucasfilm for $4.05 billion, it was a major investment. The rationale behind it was that investing that amount of money would enable them to release a new Star Wars project every year, every last one which would be a hit, all while collecting a fortune in licensing and merchandise revenue. From a return on investment point of view, they were off to a great start with The Force Awakens and Rogue One, 2 movies released in as many years, both accompanied by a healthy spike in Star Wars merchandise sales. Then came Rian Johnson's Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Following a strong start in its opening weekend, the box office returns soon started pointing downwards, as did every single other marker of success. Toys and other merchandise started collecting dust on shelves, and the subsequent movie, Solo: A Star Wars Story, outright flopped. A first in Star Wars history. That flop, however, was soon followed by another, namely Galaxy's Edge. With it flopping, combined with declining merchandise sales, Solo flopping, and a fanbase increasingly rooting for key executives to be fired, all are indications that Star Wars so far has not worked out the way Disney had intended. Even the print edition of Bloomberg covered this in a lengthy expose, and Disney shareholders actually read that. Which isn't necessarily true for the entertainment outlets that have previously covered how Star Wars is failing. What this amounts to is that the pressure is on The Rise of Skywalker to perform and fix this. From what we have been told, Disney has, by way of Lucasfilm, given Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker 2 objectives. Even if they won't admit it in public, Disney are reportedly aware that The Last Jedi broke Star Wars. As such, the first objective for The Rise of Skywalker is to undo the damage and tie up the Skywalker saga in a manner which all audiences will find satisfying. J.J. Abrams himself spoke about this in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, which was released during the making of this video. The other objective is derived from the first, in that The Rise of Skywalker has to leave the audience hungry for more stories set in the Star Wars universe, thereby priming them for the upcoming Benioff and Weiss trilogy, if that is indeed still happening. Some shakeup is reportedly in process behind the scenes. Be that as it may, for Disney, it is exceedingly important that both of these objectives are met. According to the news making the rounds, when the original round of principal photography was nearing completion, Abrams informed Disney that the movie wouldn't satisfy everyone. With reference to the previously listed objectives, this was not what Disney wanted to hear. Furthermore, this was not something that they were willing to accept. From their point of view, the movie must please everyone or come close to it. As such, they instructed Abrams to do it over, and if need be, over again after that, until he got it right. This is what we mean by the John Carter treatment. On John Carter, Pixar director Andrew Stanton wanted to change the way movies were made by applying the Pixar school of making animated features to live action. The Pixar way was starting out with a concept and draft a script, animating it, but then testing it and then redoing it over and over again until everything was just perfect. Due to his track record at Pixar and John Lasseter campaigning for him, Disney, incredibly, let him do something like this on John Carter. But doing it in animation is one thing, doing it in live action is quite another. As expected, the first cut didn't work, which was fine, so the principal cast were called in for the scheduled reshoots. But the movie didn't work after these either. More reshoots were needed, and this time getting the actors back proved to be both more expensive and more time-consuming than anticipated. In the end, after several cycles of retooling, they ran out of time. The movie had to be released, but they hadn't retooled it enough to bring out that perfect version of it that the method had always produced at Pixar. However, they had retooled it enough that the production cost had ballooned way beyond what was planned. This, combined with the modest box office, led John Carter to being one of the greatest box office flops of all time. Yet that method of retooling over and over is reportedly what is being done on The Rise of Skywalker. The reason an incredible 6 endings were possible with the editing is that, like with John Carter, none of the cuts they tested clicked with test audiences. So they had to go back and retool it some more, creating ever more branching paths in the process. However, there is a release date looming on the horizon. At some point, retooling must end, the cut must be locked down, and the movie must be made ready for release. This is where the similarities with John Carter end, as there they stopped retooling and tweaking in time. Although the finished cut wasn't what they had wanted it to be, the movie was completed without undue corners being cut, and with time to spare. That did not happen on Justice League, and this is where the similarities between Justice League and The Rise of Skywalker begins. Justice League, which Midnight's Edge has covered extensively, is another project that needed massive retooling. However, unlike John Carter, which was completed with time to spare, Justice League had to be compromised in order to make the release date. The release version contained both special effects work and editing blunders that under normal circumstances would have never been shown to a paying audience. But they cut the time frame between the release date and the final batch of reshoots so short that finishing the movie to conventional standards simply wasn't possible. This is not to say that The Rise of Skywalker will be released in as deplorable a state as Justice League. Disney would see every special effects shop in Hollywood burnt to the ground and every employee fired before they let that happen. However, if the movie is still indeed filming, and word on the street says that it is, then The Rise of Skywalker is no better than Justice League where time management is concerned. For comparison, J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek reboot was 100% completed and ready for release 2 months ahead of schedule. 2 months before its release, his Rise of Skywalker is still shooting. Getting it ready in time for release is still doable, but it is not cheap. That will add to the movie's cost, which in turn adds to how much it must gross in order to break even and be successful. And money is what this is all about. As stated earlier, Disney paid $4.05 billion for Lucasfilm and Star Wars. When they did that, they knowingly overpaid. We will break down the details in an upcoming video, but to make a long story short, the number crunchers at Disney only valued Lucasfilm and Star Wars in the vicinity of $3.5 billion. When they stretched themselves to $4.05 billion, that put increased pressure on Star Wars to perform. Ever since The Last Jedi, Star Wars has not performed the way it needed to justify what the bean counters deemed it to be worth, let alone what they actually paid for it. The major additional expenses incurred from retooling The Rise of Skywalker over and over, as well as the expenses still to come, will only serve to raise the bar for how well not just The Rise of Skywalker, but all future Star Wars movies must perform in order to be successful. Because that's the reason they are going through this. To salvage the brand, so you, the audience, will still want more Star Wars even after you've seen The Rise of Skywalker. Do you think The Rise of Skywalker will succeed in its objectives? Does hearing how much more has gone into retooling make you more excited to see the movie? Let us know in the comments.